for overall student satisfaction. A community which remarkably represents more than 130 nationalities.
For decades, Queen Camilla fought her way into the heart of the monarchy, her influence increasing greater with each year. She was once whispered about within palace walls, but today she stands in full regalia beside King Charles, crowned, titled, and enthroned in the heart of Buckingham Palace. Or so it appeared. That illusion was broken today. In a decision that surprised royal insiders and shook the country, Prince William has ordered Camilla a lifelong ban from entering Buckingham Palace again. This was not a peaceful retirement, nor a dignified step back. This was exile, permanent, deliberate. According to intimate palace insiders, this has been in the works for decades. The animosity between William and Camilla began before this week, when Diana's life was ripped apart. William may have worn the royal grin for years, but behind the scenes, the suffering persisted. He regarded Camilla not as a stepmother, but as the woman who upended his mother's world, filled his youth with whispered scandals, and eventually attempted to rewrite royal history as if Diana had not existed. And now, with Kate Middleton going through one of the most difficult times of her life, Camilla has crossed a line she never should have crossed. According to leaked documents and eyewitness testimony, this was more than just personality disputes or ceremonial stress. This was about planned efforts, such as Camilla undermining Kate during her health problems, seeking to influence King Charles's decisions on future titles, and even making unsettling remarks about the next generation of royals. And Prince William? He'd had enough. The suspension was not an internal smack on the wrist. It was public, strong, and delivered with unwavering clarity. Camilla, the so-called queen consort, has been denied admission to the palace that once represented her last victory. And now, that emblem has turned its back on her. What happens next may change the monarchy as we know it, because this is more than just one woman being thrown away. It's about a kid protecting his mother's heritage, a husband defending his wife, and a future monarch carving a line in royal marble that no one, including the current monarch, can erase. In this expose, we look at the scandalous circumstances that led up to William's lifelong ban, his astonishing declaration, and the collapse of a royal fantasy kept together by scandal, quiet, and spin. Camilla has been banned, but the real question is, how much longer can Charles hang on? It all started with a meeting, quiet, controlled, and very limited. No journalists, no courtiers beyond the circle, and no Camilla. Just 4 men sat in a high-ceiling chamber at Buckingham Palace: King Charles, Prince William, the Lord Chamberlain, and the royal legal advisor. The date was deleted from internal papers, but sources insist it was less than 2 weeks before the public revelation that would fracture the monarchy's image of togetherness. What was said within the chamber was expected to remain private. However, like with all royal secrets, the truth eventually comes to light. The reason for the meeting was straightforward, but unprecedented. Prince William had formally requested that Camilla's access to Buckingham Palace be revoked, not a suspension. This is not a distance, a full lifetime prohibition. To royal observers, this may seem impossible. Camilla, after all, was not a marginal character. She was queen consort, the king's wife, and she was crowned with Charles in a lavish ceremony that cost taxpayers millions. However, when confidence is shattered within the palace, titles may become paper thin, and William arrived with evidence, pages of it. Camilla is said to have waged a stealthy power struggle within palace gates for the past 6 months. She allegedly contacted workers from several departments, including finance, etiquette, and even security, attempting to gain control over topics much beyond her ceremonial function. What is the most worrisome issue? Her efforts to meddle with succession-related procedures, such as estate management for the Prince and Princess of Wales, as well as internal news releases regarding William and Kate's children. In short, Camilla had pushed limits that no consort was ever supposed to breach. But it wasn't just about institutional overreach. The turning point came when Camilla was discovered on internal palace surveillance, conversing honestly with a top staffer. She allegedly called William's family decorative darlings clinging to Diana's ghost, and remarked that the next queen should at least know how to survive a scandal. Palace security saw the tape, which was corroborated by at least 2 staff members, and privately shared it with William. And after seeing it, he made a choice. He did not confront Camilla. He did not seek Charles for permission. He proceeded directly to the palace's legal structure. He used a clause hidden in the royal household charter that permitted senior heirs to request staff limits due to internal threats or wrongdoing. When William came into that conference, he was more than simply a son. He represented the crown's future, and in that moment, he resolved to act out of protection rather than vengeance for his wife, his children, and his mother's legacy. King Charles reportedly did not respond for about 10 minutes after William made the request. Aides said he appeared pale, startled, and torn, but he did not oppose it overtly, because deep inside, Charles knew the walls were closing in. Camilla's actions have grown bolder in the last year. Some claim she had become used to the concept of genuine authority, rather than merely ceremonial reverence. When Charles finally spoke, he asked whether the situation might be handled internally. William declined. He was not asking for a favor. He was making a formal demand, supported by his legal right to the throne. So, under pressure and in accordance with convention, the Lord Chamberlain approved the petition. The royal legal advisor wrote a sealed document, which was incorporated into the palace's operating records. The phrasing was straightforward and simple. Effective immediately, Camilla, Queen Consort, will be denied physical access to Buckingham Palace property, offices, and ceremonial apartments. This limitation will stay in effect for the remainder of her life. The prohibition was genuine. The decision was finalized. The shockwaves hadn't yet begun to impact. What happened after the encounter would quickly become one of the most controversial episodes in royal history, because once Camilla heard the news, she did not leave lightly, and what William did next would cause the royal press machine to erupt. But below it all, one reality remained constant. The future king had spoken, and for Camilla, the doors of Buckingham Palace had banged shut forever. For many years, Catherine, Princess of Wales, has exemplified elegance under strain. She handled media storms, palace politics, and unspoken tensions behind the scenes with calm dignity. Kate, unlike others, did not crave power or fame. She sought calm, stability, and most importantly, safety for her family. However, even the strongest can be pushed too far. Kate experienced the moment when she was most vulnerable. The world watched with sadness when Kensington Palace revealed Kate's medical condition earlier this year. Messages from all across the world arrived, including good wishes from leaders, celebrities, and even foreign royalty. But from Camilla, silence. Cold, purposeful quiet. She not only refused to issue a public statement of support, but she also reportedly rejected an internal text drafted by the palace press office to express collective concern on behalf of the royal family. That refusal alone stung. However, what happened next was more than just harsh. It was personal. Camilla was caught making disparaging remarks about Kate's health during a special diplomatic reception at Clarence House. "Some flowers just weren't made for winter," she allegedly said, alluding to Kate's absence. The statement, while mild on the surface, had stinging overtones, especially when followed by a chuckle and a loaded glance toward a foreign ambassador's wife. The connotation was clear. Kate was too vulnerable for the throne. When the statement made its way back to Kensington via a reliable source, someone in the room, it struck like a dagger. For the first time, Kate broke her silence. Those closest to the princess described the moment as one of subtle yet significant transformation. There were no tears, no fury, simply resolve. According to a close acquaintance, Kate informed William, "This isn't all about me anymore. It's about what we accept around our kids." Kate had always thought that being quiet meant preserving the peace, but now she saw her quiet was being twisted into weakness. and used by someone who had spent decades battling for a seat she was never supposed to have. It was no longer only about her own dignity. It was about safeguarding the crown's legacy, as well as her children's future. William, who was already suffering from accumulating proof of Camilla's behind-the-scenes machinations, took her warning seriously. That same evening, insiders believe he canceled all non-essential commitments and planned the secret meeting at Buckingham that resulted in Camilla's suspension. What happened next, however, surprised even the most experienced aides. Kate formally removed her return timetable from public circulation. Kate's team cited personal reassessment of safety and royal boundaries. In other words, she was done pretending. Kensington Palace insiders then revealed that Kate would not attend any future Buckingham Palace functions if Camilla was still there. The ultimatum pushed William's hand, and it provided him the last moral clarity he required, because it wasn't just his wife talking. The future Queen of England refused to be regarded as an inconvenience. Kate had demonstrated unwavering loyalty, respect, and diligent behavior, and for Camilla to ridicule her during her illness, that crossed a boundary that the firm could not overlook. So when William acted, he did not just talk as a son or husband. He functioned as a defender of his wife, his mother's memory, and the monarchy that his children would eventually inherit. Kate stood behind it all. It's no longer silent, as steady as ever. However, this time, a barrier was drawn that even the Queen Consort would not be permitted to pass. Diana's presence can still be felt in the palace's glittering hallways, not in paintings or sculptures, but in the tension that characterizes the modern monarchy. For Prince William, his mother's death was not a chapter in a royal tragedy. It was the start of a conflict he had never chosen, but would eventually have to end. And now that day has arrived. For years, William remained courteous to Camilla. He shook her hand at engagements, smiled for pictures, and gave carefully worded interviews when questioned about his father's wife. However, those who knew him well believe his childhood traumas were never truly healed. How could they, when the woman his mother had called the third person in my marriage was now parading the palace halls wearing a crown? Camilla's interior team presented Charles with a design suggestion, which served as the turning point. What's the goal? To modernize a Buckingham Palace wing that hosts exclusive family parties. But hidden in the plan was a detail that shocked William: the destruction of Diana's beloved sitting room, the sole location in the palace that had remained unchanged since her death. It had been kept out of respect, a peaceful refuge complete with her original decor, furnishings, and photos. When George and Charlotte visited the palace, William would often take them there to tell them stories about their grandmother, whom they would never meet. Camilla wanted it gone. When William learned of the proposition, he did not raise his voice. He did not burst into meetings. He went silent, dangerously quiet. Those closest to him claim his demeanor changed immediately. According to one assistant, it was like watching a dam begin to crack. He made one call to the palace's Cultural Protection Committee and ordered that the project be suspended indefinitely. Camilla was furious when she discovered the truth. She allegedly accused William of weaponizing grief for personal gain. That sentence was the final blow. Because for William, grief was not a weapon, but rather the oxygen he had learnt to breathe. A youngster went behind his mother's coffin while the entire world watched. A boy who witnessed his father remarry the woman his mother asked the world to accept had damaged her. A guy who smiled through every anniversary, headline, and documentary about Diana's grief. However, it was no longer about the past. Camilla had touched something precious, and William would not let it pass. What followed was quick. Within days, William called a private council, the same meeting that resulted in Camilla's lifetime ban. However, it wasn't merely legal power that influenced his judgment. It was something far deeper. He made a solemn commitment to himself. No one will remove her, not while I am alive. Several insiders have now verified that William took one personal memento to the meeting. a small framed portrait of Diana during her final journey to Angola, where she walked through a minefield to fight for a better world. It remained on the table throughout the conversation. That was not politics. That was a son ensuring that his mother's voice was heard in the most important room. Camilla didn't simply cross a boundary, she sparked a legacy. Because Diana was more than a memory to William. She was on a mission. Camilla's goal now had a name. She would never return to the location that had attempted to silence the lady who came before her. When word of Camilla's ban reached King Charles, it was not delivered in hushed tones. It arrived as a signed royal directive, brought to his desk and stamped with his own son's authority seal. And, for the first time throughout his reign, the emperor found himself completely helpless within his own castle. Charles had always walked a fine line between his job as king and his intense attachment to Camilla, whom he had previously fought the whole royal system to legalize. Their love story, however contentious, has endured scandal, reaction, and years of quiet. He made her queen. He rewrote history. But suddenly, that carefully constructed story was collapsing in a single afternoon. Those closest to the king said he was obviously shocked by William's choice. According to one aide, Charles paced for nearly 2 hours, muttering fragments like unprecedented, overreach, and not like this. Behind closed doors, he called emergency meetings with palace lawyers and senior advisors, looking for a way to reverse or at least delay the ban's implementation. Unfortunately, it was too late. William had acted decisively, and the command had already been incorporated into the palace's internal government. Worse, the public applauded it. Social media exploded in favor of the Prince of Wales, with popular hashtags including #ProtectKate and #Diana would be proud. The public, who had grown sick of Camilla's rise to prominence, perceived the decision as a needed course correction rather than a royal scandal. It was not a family feud, it was a moral stance. Charles, alone and emotionally besieged, went to his only remaining option, a private appeal to his son. Insiders corroborate Charles's desire for a personal audience with William at Windsor. The two talked for slightly under an hour, with no advisors or press secretaries, just father and son in a place filled with history. Charles, they claim, did not yell or threaten. He pleaded, speaking about the monarchy's image. He spoke of dignity, Camilla's years of loyalty, and the potential disruption the transfer would bring in the press and among Commonwealth leaders. But William did not waver. He allegedly informed his father, "There's more at stake than just the press. This is about trust. My wife won't be ridiculed. My children will not be manipulated. And my mother will not be forgotten." It was the type of discourse that left profound cracks. When William left the room, Charles allegedly sat in silence for about 20 minutes, looking at the same crest-bearing letter that had upended his personal life. And Camilla? She wasn't in Windsor. She had already retired to Ray Mill House, her own estate in Wiltshire. According to sources, she refused to speak to anybody other than her immediate staff. A former acquaintance claimed she shouted when she learned of the prohibition and destroyed a crystal decanter in rage. "They never wanted me here," she allegedly stated. "Now they've made it official." The king was faced with a difficult decision: protect his wife and risk alienating his heir, or accept the new truth that his reign was fading into the shadow of the next. He chose quiet. There is no public statement. There is no attempt to soften the tale, just the silent realization that his authority had hit a wall, and that wall was William's commitment. The crown had not toppled, but Charles did. And at that moment of reckoning, he knew that the monarchy was no longer characterized by who wore it, but by who safeguarded it. And this time, it was not him. While Camilla's fall from grace dominated headlines, another tale was happening beneath the surface. William and Kate's gradual but obvious rise. No announcements, no declarations. It's just an activity. And in the royal realm, action is more important than a crown. In the weeks following Camilla's banishment from Buckingham Palace, a strange pattern emerged. Key palace occasions that would traditionally be patronized by the king and queen consort were now routed to the Prince and Princess of Wales. The monarchy's public-facing tasks were gradually transferring to Kensington Palace, including charity galas, diplomatic receptions, and youth initiatives. Royal personnel started asking for redeployment. According to insider sources, 3 key staff in Charles and Camilla's office departed, only to resurface days later under William's guidance. The message was clear. Energy had changed. The future had come, rather than being on its way. Foreign dignitaries' comments were very illuminating. During a recent state dinner for a visiting European royal, the foreign delegation asked that William and Kate, not Charles and Camilla, host the event. Palace officials claim it was a diplomatic maneuver, out of respect for continuity. But no one was deceived. The entire planet was keeping an eye on the changing tide and making adjustments as needed. Meanwhile, Kate, who was still making limited public appearances owing to her health, began exerting discreet influence from behind the scenes. Charities she had championed for over a decade received increased funding. Her internet presence, which she maintained with grace and moderation, became a focus for royal admirers. Supporters swarmed the comment sections with admiration, not just for her bravery, but also for her unshakable class in the face of mayhem. "She's everything a queen should be," a royal journalist tweeted, "and she hasn't even worn the crown yet." Back within the palace, even Camilla's relatives began to withdraw from the spectacle. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, allegedly told pals he was staying out of it. He refuses to speak with the press and has not been in public with his mother since the ban. But it wasn't just the people and the press who shifted their allegiances. Even lifelong royal traditionalists, who had previously silently backed Camilla for Charles's sake, began to recognize something had changed. William was not acting out of emotions. He was in charge. In doing so, he was shaping what the monarchy would become in the next generations. And the future looked nothing like the past. The notion of a fragmented organization bound together by antiquated protocol was no longer prevalent. In its place stood a contemporary royal couple, rooted in personal anguish, but elevated by public trust. William has been sculpted by tragedy, but it is no longer what defines him. Kate, tested by fire, emerges more popular than ever. They weren't waiting for a coronation to assume their positions. They were earning it. Camilla's name has been secretly removed from numerous ceremonial calendars, and her access to royal homes, including Sandringham and Windsor, is currently being reviewed. Aides to William have intimated that this is only the beginning of a longer-term change, one that prioritizes the public above preference in shaping the crown's destiny. Even while Charles remains on the throne, the true transfer in power cannot be ignored, because the firm may operate by tradition. However, the people have elected their king and queen. Their names are William and Catherine. The gates of Buckingham Palace have seen emperors crowned and civilizations collapse. But few events in its long history can compare to this. A queen barred, not by tabloid controversy, but by the heir to the throne himself. Prince William did more than merely punish Camilla by cutting off her access. He reshaped the monarchy's orientation. This was not about politics. It was not about vengeance. It was about creating a line fashioned by memories, pain, and the need to protect a family that had endured far too much in silence. With Camilla's exile, William has delivered a message to the world. The monarchy will no longer be based on compromise and cover-up. It will be based on accountability and legacy. Camilla's dream, which she battled so hard to attain, is suddenly slipping away. There will be no more palace receptions, silent power plays, or quiet influence from behind the scenes. She may still hold the title of Queen Consort, But she is no longer welcome in the eyes of the public, much alone within the walls of the most significant royal home. And while King Charles survives, his silence is more powerful than any decree. In the absence of intervention, he has given up more than simply control. He has handed over the institution's heart to his son. Meanwhile, William and Kate reign supreme, not by force, but with unyielding principle. Together they are creating a monarchy for the people, one that recalls Diana's compassion, appreciates Kate's elegance, and leads with the power Camilla never possessed. This moment will be remembered in history as a reckoning rather than a scandal. A queen may have been left behind, but in her stead, a crown has been reclaimed by the only woman the public has ever truly desired, and by her son, who is determined to honor her. The future has spoken, and it no longer bears Camilla's name.